Bakugou's head feels fuzzy. It's all muddled around like there's cotton filling up the space, and in between every little tuft, fireworks are going off. He feels warm, which is strange because he knows he's still outside in the dark, in the snow, without a real coat on, and he hates the winter. He hates the cold. It gets to him so easily through every layer he puts on, and yet right now he feels especially hot all over. There's hands on his cheeks so big and warm, a solid frame pushed up against his own. And suddenly, when he opens his eyes, not even remembering having closed them, he's caught in a fiery gaze of bright red. Bakugou. The cotton has extended to his ears. He has to focus, blinking dumbly into those bright eyes and try not to get consumed by the warmth surrounding him, inside him, burning him up all over in the glow. Huh. Dude, I think you seriously kissed him into a coma. Bakugou. A thumb rolls across his cheek, right under his eye, and Bakugou's so disappointed to find there's another voice around besides Kirishima's. For a second, he forgot that anyone else was there, and then it all hit him. Oh. His brain and his body connect again. He might want to kill everyone around him and then himself. He doesn't. He pushes that baser instinct down enough to not freak out, grab hold of the simmering warmth that still pulls in his stomach, coils it up in his fist to keep it right where it is, not wanting to let the feeling go. For once, he thinks he deserves this. He doesn't want to push it away. Still, he's embarrassed enough to look at least a little sheepish. He spaced out that bad from just a kiss, after all. Sorry, He looks behind him at Kirishima's friends and family. Ashido and Sarah were standing together, leaning into each other, both looking a little too self-satisfied with the current events that unfolded in the span of a few seconds. Kaminari is also grinning, stupider though, throwing him a thumbs up as soon as he catches his eye. Tetsu rolls his eyes, but doesn't look angry, more so like he wants to look away from the mushy romance. Like Kirishima might have been blabbering to him already all day about this. Bakugou turns back to Kirishima, still so close that the foggy breath he exhales swirls around him. Welcome home. He gets another kiss for good measure, reminding him not to let go, and only forgiving Kirishima when he pulls away when he takes his hand in his to walk up the snowy path to the house. I cannot believe you did all this, Kirishima exclaims, looking around the yard to take in every single light that stretches across his property, making the edges of the forest glow with a rainbow. But why? I didn't say anything. Bakugou shrugs, taking it all in with him. He still doesn't quite see the magic that Kirishima does. They're bright, they flicker. They're robotic deer moving like robotic deer. But he does see how much joy it brings Kirishima, his eyes wide and still damp, and that's enough. He doesn't need a reason more than that. Didn't have to. I thought it'd be nice. You're always helping out everyone else, so I figured, well. Another shrug, trying to make it not seem like a big deal. I was just lucky you still had all the lights. I've never been able to let them go, Kirishima says, smiling. I haven't seen them like this in years. Yeah, that's exactly what Bakugou thought, exactly what Ashido confirmed. Thought it'd be a nice present. His hand is squeezed, Kirishima brushing up close to his side. It's amazing. Bakugou understands why people like to give presents all of a sudden. Speaking of, Kirishima perks up, wiping at his eyes and cheeks quickly as he suddenly pulls Bakugou back down the driveway by the hand, both of them nearly going down on a patch of ice, just barely keeping themselves standing with the wobbly support of one another, and Kirishima brings him up to his car, sitting there, looking like it smashed into a tree, but running nonetheless. Merry Christmas. The dents in the front of the car are still there, the hood and front bumper bent up. One of the headlights is cracked, the front tires looking newer, and the windshield replaced, but it is his car that spun out on a patch of black ice, the car he thought was forever lost to the tree line and snow, and now it sits here before him looking beat up, but having just been running a few minutes ago. I seriously can't believe you fixed this piece of shit. He extends his foot out, surprised to find when he taps the bumper with his boot it doesn't squeak or groan or completely fall off. Kirishima laughs. Well, I didn't do too much. Just towed it to Tetsu's shop, and it's getting him fixed it all up mostly. Good portion of the time I was kinda in the way, but I'm good about handing over the right tools when asked. Bakugo knew that part of that had to be a lie. He had to have his hands deep in motor oil. There was no way Kirishima would be the type to stand around and watch. All the times he would disappear off with Tetsu, he could have easily come back or not gone at all. He's sure, but he was involved. Bakugo just knew it. But the giant idiot was downplaying this as if he didn't very likely beg his cousin and his wife to fix up the stranger's car for him. Even more so, it wasn't a single day worth of thought. He had to have gotten the car towed before the snowstorm, he was sure. Maybe when he was still passed out with the doctor, he went back to drag his car from the side of the road. Maybe right there and then he decided he wanted to fix it up just because he was that type of guy. Nice, thoughtful, caring in a way that was almost painful to watch. The kind of guy who rescues a stranger from a storm, lets him stay at his house, gives him food, introduces him to his friends. All the while the stranger is a complete and utter ass. But he still did it. All of it, with a smile on his face, happily moving around Bakugou like he'd grown up here instead of crash-landed. When Bakugou looks at him, even now he still sees the most genuine of smiles. The sunshine radiating off of Kirishima even in the dark of winter, even when everything else around him is dead. Somehow Kirishima brings it all to life. Brings Bakugou to life. And fuck, he's horrified to admit he likes it, loves it, wants to know how that might feel in the long term. So now, you can go home. It feels like a bucket of cold water drenches him, poured directly down his throat, choking its way down, extinguishing any and all fire that he held until even the embers were damp ashes in his gut, drowning. He lets the hand holding his slip between his fingers, trying to play it off as natural as he runs both hands over the beat-up hood of the car, face turned away from Kirishima in an attempt to square his features before he can see how disappointed he looks. His fingers are so wind-bitten cold now, he can't feel his fingertips. He shouldn't have let himself get carried away with dumb fantasies. He has a way out now. It's not a distant when, and Kirishima gave it to him. His job, his apartment, parents, cat, sort of friends. They all still exist outside of these few acres of distant village in the snow. He can't keep ignoring them. He has to go back. Thank you, Bakugou manages to say after a little bit more time of staring, telling himself to pull his shit together. He's sincere. He still can't believe Kirishima would do this just for him. But the new freedom it brings is hard to think about. He turns, somehow pulling a smile to his features, small but there, private, just for Kirishima to see. Come on, though. He takes his hand again, not as tight as before, but maybe just to make it last long enough to remember. I have one other thing to show you. Inside, the lights are on. Bakugou's almost happy for it, though it takes away from the dramatic glow of the last part of his display. They can see better. As soon as he steps through the garage into the living room, Kirishima is frozen in the doorway. Bakugou lets go of his hand, finding that it's impossible to pull him along, but that's okay. He lets him take it in. Along the ceiling, garlands braided with white fairy lights have been hung, draped evenly in half circles all around the room, wall to wall. Red bows tied at every other circle's edge and carefully hung from the garland, all looped around the room, are the small origami creations collected over time. Little paper cranes, Christmas trees, stars, diamonds, all the crooked little shapes and animals on various shades of solid and marbled paper, all dangling like delicate wind chimes around the room, glowing gently in the white starlights. Kirishima is breathless. Behind him, Ashido pushes him through the threshold, but she too doesn't go much further than Kirishima himself. Sero, Kaminari, and Tetsu squeeze inside as well, but all of them pause as soon as they see the decorations, all wide-eyed, silent as they stare around the room. At the time, Bakugou didn't think he'd get this reaction. It was for Kirishima after all, but now, as he turns to, looking up, he realizes. All around the room hang memories of their collective childhood, a memory of so many Christmas past of sitting in this very house, all gathered around a table with paper in their hands, trying to fold shapes too intricate for pudgy little fingers still trying to learn coordination, with a patient mother and aunt sitting with them to help them out, cheer them on, so happy to see whatever they managed to make. Little frogs that barely hop, uneven stars, growing into the sharp corners of a crane, of the folded trees with all their levels even. It's an archived collection of Kirishima Akiko's life, all of the happiness she brought with it. All 5 of them are remembering these fond moments, all of them so much younger, so much more naive and innocent, with missing teeth and bruised knees, all together with blankets over their shoulders to keep warm. Mugs of hot chocolate in their hands, watching demonstrations of origami so closely, knowing that no matter how poorly they turned out, they would be stored away safely to be cherished year after year by this one woman who meant so much to them all. None of them say anything, still, but Bakugou notices the glimmer in all of their eyes. Tetsu moves first, just a few steps, and reaches up with calloused hands, nails stained from work, so hesitant to touch, but he does. Just barely brushing the edges of his fingers up against one paper crane made of a blue and gray marbled paper, one of its wings bent awkwardly, its tail a little smushed. "This was the first one I managed to make right," he says. Bakugou is hit with an ache in his chest. He thinks he might actually die from it. He doesn't want to leave any of them. "Merry Christmas." They all stay for dinner. Tetsu calls Itsuka, who had just closed up the shop, telling her to come over, and not a half hour later she shows up on a snowmobile with a bright smile on her face and a small smudge of grease still on her chin. All of this suits her perfectly, Bakugou thinks. There's not enough room in the kitchen itself, so they spill out into the den, all sitting around the tables talking, switching spots every once in a while to intermingle. Bakugou holds fast in the kitchen, finding Kirishima's ramshackle collection of ingredients works well for a tempura mod podge. Shrimp, chicken, broccoli, rinkin. Bakugou focuses on batter, oil, making rice and sauce. He moves around the kitchen, back to most everyone else. Just listening to them converse. It's all a jolly mood. Kaminari knows where Kirishima keeps his liquor, so suddenly there's whiskey being passed around, beers opened, and the mood gets even livelier. With his focus, it's easier for Bakugou to forget about the ache in his chest, zeroing in on the task at hand of making enough food for everyone. It's easy as he gets into the swing of everything, not wanting anything to burn as he adjusts oil, gets plates ready, tries to remember where Kirishima keeps things around the kitchen. He's so keyed in that, when a pair of arms wrap around his waist, he nearly elbows the body behind him in the gut. Thankfully, he's able to hold himself back as a chin presses into his shoulder, red hair coming into view at his side eye. It breaks his focus, breaks down everything he's been trying to ignore since he stepped into the kitchen. The warmth in his stomach feels like a burden now. "Smells really good." Kirishima's voice rumbles behind him, so close if Bakugou turned just barely he'd be able to nuzzle up against his cheek. "You didn't have to cook, though." Bakugou snorts, rolling his eyes as he lays another few shrimp into the batter. "Oh yeah, and who was gonna cook? You?" "I could've." Bakugou turns in the hold, Kirishima letting him, leaning back so Bakugou has room to move. He loops his arms around his neck, letting them dangle, trying to make sure he doesn't get his dirt fingers on Kirishima's shirt or hair. "Go and hang out with your friends." Bakugou nods towards everyone behind them. "I'll finish this up. It'll just be us after they leave anyway." Kirishima's eyes sparkle at that, the implication in them clear, and Bakugou tries not to admit how it also affects him as well. He isn't left alone without a kiss on his cheek and a cheeky little smile that leaves him feeling almost worse as he turns back to the food, trying to regain focus instead of thinking about what little time they have left. After dinner, when everyone is full and more than a little tipsy in some cases, Bakugou brings out the box that all the origami ornaments came in. They've all moved to the den now, either sitting on the couch or sprawled out onto the floor. Kirishima started a fire too. Even with the power being on, the fire is nice, warm, and gives the space a cozy feeling of welcome. I found some more, by the way. He sets it down on the coffee table, opening the top. More what? Kaminari perks his head up from where he's laying on the carpet, cheeks red with alcohol. Paper. From the bottom of the box, he brings out squares of paper, some of it general kids' craft paper in various rainbow colors, but others are more elegant. They're made of heavier weights, white spanning from snow to cream to tan. Others that are soft with frayed edges looking handmade, hand-dipped, watercolor markings, and water-marbled surfaces. You're all required to make something before you leave. Bakugou fans them all out, and almost as quickly pieces are being snatched up. The level of concentration in the room skyrockets as all these adults revert nearly 15 years into children sitting on their knees as each line up corners and fold edges carefully. Ashido helps Sero remember angles. Itsuka and Tetsu make a Christmas tree and a star to match. Kirishima sits next to Bakugou, so close that their thighs touch and neither care to do anything about it. Their shoulders brush, arms press together, and at one point with the angle Kirishima moves his arm to loop in between Bakugou's, interlocking them without their elbows knocking together. Bakugou moves closer, pressing up against him, just so neither have to stretch too far, neither say a word. They both make grains, one orange and one red. Together they look like a small bundle of fire, burning to keep the other warm. Before they leave, each new addition gets hung on the garland, adding to the years of tradition and memories, all spinning gently on their new strings, reflecting the shine of white light, sharp angles casting small shadows as they move. Bakugou watches his little paper crane dangling, added with a little nudge from Kirishima, happy to know at least that the little ornament will get to remain in his stead. He thinks, regardless if it's true, that his keeps turning towards Kirishima's hanging just a half loop away. It's easy to keep his mouth shut, to follow Kirishima into his bedroom with both their cheeks warm from whiskey and have their hands do all the talking. It's easy to fall back against the bed, to welcome the hands running up under his shirt, warm and broad against his stomach, moving up his ribs. To answer any silent request with a kiss for more, wanting, and so easy with a foggy brain of food and drink to forget that there's a timeline. That this isn't a one-night stand, but it's close, which makes it all the worse. Because Bakugou now understands how good that grip is against his hips. How much he enjoys the weight of Kirishima against his back. He knows how amazing the feeling of heated eyes on his skin is. How Kirishima looks at him with a depth he's never been gifted with before. How he smiles, how he laughs, how he holds him, all of it. And how disappointing it is to wake up alone. Why are you turning away from me? Kirishima asks, stopping Bakugou as he moves to roll over onto his stomach when they're both naked. When Bakugou can feel how hard both of them are, and knows if they go for much longer grinding against each other he might not last long enough to be fully satisfied. Bakugou looks back at him over his shoulder, throwing a confused look at him while he grabs for a pillow to get comfortable. To have sex? Why else? Kirishima shakes his head, guiding Bakugou's body back to face him. His fingers are so soft. It's unfair the polar opposites they possess. Well, yeah, but I want to see you this time. Bakugou's heart stops. Oh. The lights are on. Not fully, but there's enough light coming from the nightstand lamps that Bakugou recognizes his own vulnerability. He can see fully the soft gaze Kirishima gives him, watching as his path journeys from his face downwards. It's the same kind of look he'd given him the night before, so focused and intent on memorizing every corner of his body, except now Bakugou was fully open to it. There is no darkness to convince his brain otherwise. It makes him uncomfortable. He's not used to this kind of attention. It feels too much like, I really did a number on you last night, huh? Kirishima's hands brush over the bruises he left behind, blossoming as the day passed into dark marks scattered across his body, slightly tender to the touch. Bakugou does his best not to wiggle, trying his hardest to lay still, not show how frayed his nerves really are. Yeah, and you can do it again, too. Going so slow, acting like you've got all the time in the world. He hooks an ankle across the small of Kirishima's back, pulling him down. He's not desperate, he tries to remember. He's eager. Fuck me. Hold on, Kirishima says with a smile, arms at either side of Bakugou's head. Their bodies so close together he can feel the pressure against his own ribs as Kirishima's chest expands when he breathes, but somehow he still holds all his own weight. He doesn't crush him. I just want to take care of you tonight, alright? If I can. No, he thinks. You can't. You're not allowed to do that to me. It's already bad enough. He's going to leave. He has to leave. He's able to leave. Bakugou can't keep clinging to something that doesn't exist, and yet he wishes this non-existent thing hurt less. He chokes for a second with too much emotion in his throat, too much despair, enough to drown 10 men over, and somehow swallows it all. Struggles, but manages, just like everything else, just like he's learned. Yeah, he answers, blinking fast enough to catch all the dew at his eyes, collecting it in his eyelashes instead of on his cheeks. Sure, take care of me. As Kirishima smiles down at him, as he kisses him, as his fingers grace his thighs, the steady beat of his heart matches up with Bakugou's own in the dim light of this room, quiet, soft. And a moan is pulled from his throat like a prayer, begging, pleading. Bakugou truly wishes that he had died in his car, frozen in the snow. Death would surely have been far less painful than this.